let's jump into this short and sharp. Number one, Collingwood, Port Adelaide on the weekend. The clear form teams in the comp. They went about their business. They toyed with their opposition and they got the wins. Really powerful footy. They flexed their muscle early against Hawthorn. No Dixon, no Boak, no Jonas, and a couple of others. Georgiades, who's out for the year, but they'd still do it like. Everyone misses players at different times, but to be able to pull it together the way Port have and to put their wins together has been awesome. And then Collingwood on the other side of the country, different. They withstood the pressure and the challenge. And West Coast played with real heart and real spirit. But then Collingwood just extended at the end in a very similar way, flexed their muscle when needed. No side bottom, no McStay, no Elliott. So in the end, there's dealing with change of personnel, and De Goey will go out of Collingwood's side. And I think that just is another chance for Collingwood to prove that it has a system that can get the job done without key personnel in different ways. So I thought that was a standout. Two teams expected to win those games, but did it in style and did it in with some real power. And as Ken Hinkley said, then you'd have to be your expectations need to be over the top to not be satisfied with what both those teams.
I agree with that. And there was some talk, well done to Hawthorn for fighting back in the second half, which part of that is true, but their work was done. It was honestly a brutal performance from Port Adelaide in the first half in hot conditions in Adelaide, and then Collingwood are 11-1, and you're probably not going to miss the grand final from that position. I wouldn't have thought. They're in an awesome spot.
No, long way to go.
The history would say 11-1. The history books, you essentially make a grand final from this position.
Does it?
Yes, it does. I know.
You know what?
I know history is not a guide of the future.
You know what? Everyone that's 11-1 that gets to granny needs to do?
What?
Win a couple of finals before they get there.
I understand.
Right, number two, Suns. They've taken a step on the weekend, and Stuart Dew, their coach, is under pressure. We spoke about this game last week around the Crows, and it was definitely validation of what they're building at the moment. They were nearly 6 goals down halfway through the second
35
quarter.
points, yeah.
So to say that you need to work on your starts is an understatement if that is a consistent thing for them. But Crows were playing good football. But what it showed for me, once again, is that the Suns need to play as many games in Darwin as they can. They've won their last 4 after losing their first 2 in, I think they started playing up there sort of 2018-19. They lost to Hawthorn, they lost to Carlton, and they've won their last 4 games. So Hawthorn, North Melbourne, Western Bulldogs, and Adelaide this year has been significant. Lukosius kicked 10 goals up there in the 2 games. Rao just loved the conditions. Humphreys loved the conditions. They played a go forward mentality, messy football, which when you're playing in that sort of humidity is exactly the way you need to go about it. And They should try and get a 3rd and a 4th game up there during the year because it would definitely be an advantage against any opposition.
Got some resilience now, don't they? They've got competitors, which he has spoken about in recent times, that refuse to lose. I thought the work that they did on Isaac Rankin, the physicality to limit his influence.
But didn't lose their focus on what they needed to do.
But he did. So that was a good sign for them, just 2 effective kicks for Rankin, and then to be challenged again and to come out on top shows that they've turned the corner.
Yeah, and Tuke Miller's sitting there in the headset and the interchange bench with a big smile on his face, and he's been the heart and soul of the club along with Jared Witts for the last 2 or 3 years. So, has become even more so. So there's some upside there. Number 3, the only query on Geelong, they're the sleeper in the second half of the year. To be the reigning premier and to be sitting where they are at the moment, they are the sleeper going into the second half. The only query is their injuries. But we know that if anyone's able to time their run and pull it all together, it's the Cats and it's Chris Scott. Cam Guthrie's out, surgery on his toe apparently. Dangerfield, Radigalea and Duncan, 3 hammies. That is the question. Are the hammies an underlying issue around their preparation physically for the year?
Yep, and age. I mean, the biggest risk is you've done one before and your age with hamstrings. So Duncan and Dangerfield, Radigalea probably hasn't had too many issues as he's not that old. So yeah, but those 3 should be back after the
Then you got Menegola with a knee, Holmes with a knee, who's reported to come back, Stanley with an eye socket, which is a contact injury. But these are the questions. But the soft tissue. So is it something fundamental and underlying that is going to recur, or are they one-offs that they can come back and manage and get them back up and running when the whips are cracking? That's the question, because as Chris Scott just mentioned, they've got young Mullen, so Zach Guthrie, who's done a fantastic job and really has been consistent for the last couple of years. Ollie Henry, who's come in and is settling himself into the side. Nevitt, who showed some real quality,
step.
had some big moments.
Good
as well.
overhead, kicked a big goal on half time. I really like him. Bruin would
Tanner
be the
Bruin.
other one.
And so you've still got a raft of young players there that are, and Sam De Goey obviously a couple of games back. You've got a raft of young players there that they're getting a look at before their time. Some of them aren't ready, but they're the most ready out of their next batch. And you find out, if you find one or two out of that, and then you add it to Stewart, Hawkins, Cameron, Dangerfield, if he gets back, there's plenty of talent in that side. And they would, grand final last year so dominant. So I don't think anyone can really write the cats off. You can presume to.
You can question where they're at.
And the questions are warranted with what they've put forward.
That was a significant performance, though. Like so all of the young guys you mentioned, but the last quarter, their big stars came to play. Stewart, Jeremy Cameron. I'd love to see his GPS, Jeremy Cameron. He was everywhere on the night. Isaac Smith was quite early, but had some big moments. So their senior players really stood up when the game was on the line as well.
Talk about legitimate guns in the competition. Tom Stewart is right up there. I mean, and he's been a star for a long time, and I think he's rated, but he's probably one of those guns that is still underrated for what he puts out there.
You'd be underrated with 4 All-Australian jackets in probably, 6 or 7 seasons?
Probably not, but he just keeps getting it done.
What a pick.
He keeps getting it done. He's a star. Have I told you my story about him?
No.
We'll get to it on the other side.
I'll look forward to doing that. Tell us about Brett Ratton.
Yeah, so the fourth one is North Melbourne's energy. My question is, Alistair Clarkson, we believe him and to be a great coach. He's a 4-time premiership coach. We've got a great profile. No one would suggest that he hasn't got the ability to get the job done with any group of players at any time. You remove him from the equation at North and Brett Ratton comes in, fresh voice, a very offensive coach, a positive coach, changes the way about it, but it's more about the negative energy that is removed from North and how much impact that actually has. But to the positive first, how good have they been in the last 3 weeks? No wins, but just a sign of what they're capable of going forward. The energy was my major focus as a positive. The second part of it is the negative energy that's left. And my supposition here is that when there's off-field issues, when there is speculation in the media about anything, whether it's off-field or on-field, it impacts the environment of the football club. It impacts the way the locker room perceives the people that are being speculated on, that stand in front of them day in, day out, to try and teach them about football and how to be better people. And yet, when they're questioned around that, there's a character assassination or indeed a legitimate question about their character that's taking place in that moment, it's almost impossible to do your job and to have a positive impact on the group of people that you're involved in.
Well, you're suggesting that it's been a positive for Alistair Clarkson to step away.
It's been a positive for North Melbourne.
The performance, yeah.
Alistair Clarkson made a decision that he clearly needed to make, was to step away.
So what now? You've got a coach that is the master and was billed as the saviour of the footy club.
Yep.
He's on huge money to the point where North have now had to apply for an exemption with their soft cap to pay Brett Ratton because he was part-time, still paying Alistair Clarkson. Where do you go to from here?
I don't know exactly how this plays out. All I know is that North Melbourne have been seemingly freed up in the last 3 weeks. Now, that may have happened anyway. It might be just the young guys coming of age. There's plenty of variables that you can't measure from the outside. My gut is that there was a heaviness in the environment at stages through the first half of the year that is gone, that is no longer there.
Hard to argue with that.
And only the people inside the club would be aware of that or would feel that. The playing group could speak to it, and their performances definitely show that. So I've lived it, and it's difficult, and it's something, as much as you try to get past it, sometimes mud sticks, and whatever Alistair Clarkson was dealing with, it definitely would have seeped into his coaching, and it definitely would have seeped into the club. And I think that's freed it up in some shape or form in the last 3 weeks. So to watch this space with what happens going forward. The fifth one is what I would deem is Jordan De Goey hysteria. He definitely deserves to be up at tribunal, and he'll get the weeks that he deserves. For mine, it's a 3. But I think the reaction post this incident has been over the top. No, it's a football action. It was instinctive football action. It's one that's not accepted in the game now. There was no raised elbows. There was no real jumping off the ground.
When you say it's a football action,
yep.
Explain how that's a football action.
You made a comment on Sunday about how you thought that it was a weak. You used the word weak.
That was a weak act.
Yeah, nah, I don't agree with you at all. And there was obviously stuff that you tried to wrap in about his off-field misdemeanors.
Is that not fair? Like, is it too much to ask?
I don't put 2 and 2 together
to
and
have
get 9.
one season where you're blemish free. Now that can be off the field, that can be on the field. Like, this is year 9 for Jordan De Goey, and I genuinely think it has been a waste of the talent that he's got, and largely due to his own fault.
Yeah, well, I think you think you're judging that every player needs to have a certain level of professionalism and an understanding of what it takes to be an AFL footballer. You compared him to Bontempelli, and I think that's if you compare him to some of the players that have at least an equal or in the same class of talent.
Yeah, that was my point, but more so
only one part of
performance.
The talent.
Yeah.
That's only one part of performance. There's different upbringings. There's different ways of seeing the world. There's different motivations that come to play to pull the final package together. But all of that is separate to what happened on the field with Jordy De Goey. Like that was a knee-jerk, like instant, blink of an eye outcome that I don't think that, Jordan, I don't reckon 5 metres before that he was thinking he's going to iron the kid out. I'm thinking he's going to go in and tackle him. He held on to the ball for a long time. I think that there's a responsibility for players to look after themselves in the football field that players have been absolved of. The duty of care needs to go to an opposition player. An opposition player needs to take care of your duty of care. The individual needs to look after himself. After he handballed, he was probably half a second from protecting himself. He was in the process of getting his arm up and protecting himself.
You're being incredibly lenient, Bucks.
No, I think he deserves 3 weeks.
Skillful player who can turn on a dime, pick the ball up, snap it over his shoulder, and we go, oh, how good's that? So you're telling me in the moment he's got options. He can tackle, he can corral. The ball was gone. It's a defenseless player who's got rid of the ball and he jumps off the ground and smashes him with his shoulder in the head.
You tried to use. He's not a defenceless player.
Well,
he's a footballer.
He's
on
an 18-year-old
AFL
kid who's got rid of the footy and he's
and
not
expecting to be. Do you reckon Geordie had time to calculate that he's an 18-year-old kid?
He's not expecting to be bumped in the head in that moment.
You're on a football field. You should be expecting
not in
contact.
the head. Not with what we know now.
What you tried to wrap up the fact that Geordie shouldn't have had that contest against that opposition because they're lowly ranked.
Well, all of that. Yeah, he just didn't
that's
need
not,
to put
that's
himself
not going to be
at
part
risk.
It's not going to be part of the calculation. And as a coach, I want my players to go out and play on edge all the time. A guy like Jordy De Goey, who's a physical beast, who plays with it, who does play on the edge and with aggression. I compare like the way that you played. Like what you think is weak would be different to what he thinks is weak.
I know, but in the end, he's going to be missing from the program for 5 weeks, possibly. With the bye. So how's that as a coach? How's that good?
And this shows you how marginal this game is. And if you've got players that are missing weeks for simply tackling their opposition, and I've been. I can't bang on this any
No, I'm
further.
with you on that, and I'm usually lenient. I'm usually on the player's side, but not on this one. This, with everything that we know, this was Tom Stewart-esque. This was jumping off the ground.
No, it wasn't jumping off the ground.
Hitting at a guy in the head. Well, he did.
No.
Yeah,
I don't think so. It's careless. It's high. The outcome was severe. He will go to the tribunal. He'll get 3 weeks, and he'll deserve his 3 weeks. I'm not absolving from any of that.
Okay.
But the hysteria that's surrounded, and what if West Coast? What are West Coast tweeting about Jordan De Goey going, it's none of their business.
They've just had a player that's been cleaned up.
It's none of their business. And Dom Sheed's saying, like, I've now just seen the vision, maybe we should have stood up for him. None of the players stood up because it wasn't seen anything outside of a football act.
All right, hold fire.
Otherwise, these teammates would have got over and remonstrated.
If you're a first-time listener to the program, we go through each of the games and ask each other the question, who does the result speak volumes about? I'll start with you, Bucks. Friday night was a shocking game.
Yep.
What did the results say more about Melbourne or Carlton?
Carlton for me. I don't think Melbourne were that much chop. I thought Petrarca, whilst he got a lot of the ball, and was the standout player, clearly the standout player on the field, even his game was a little bit shy given some of his use. But Carlton, for me, it just shows you how much in the mire that they are. Only 39 inside 50s, 44 points on the scoreboard. They're a top 6 or 7 side defensively. And like to keep an opposition to 61 sounds great. But if you're not scoring yourself, and they're really struggling to score, they're struggling to move the ball with any freedom. They're struggling to win the ball through the midfield. They're not winning contests behind the ball, and they're not winning contests in front of the ball. So Vossi said afterwards, we're not a final side right now, which means they clearly haven't been for quite a large chunk of this year. But they really struggled, and I think that speaks volumes of where the Blues are at the moment. Port Power and Hawthorn. Port Adelaide.
Says more about Port Adelaide. Their game's just in really good order across the board. Defensively, I thought it was a work of art for the first 20 minutes of that game. The way the effort that was put into the defensive aspects of that game, Hawthorn had no answers for it. But then off that, offensively, it was some of the more scintillating ball movement you've ever seen. The ball movement was exceptional. So that has definitely been a change in their game. Heavily criticised in the past about their lack of efficiency going inside forward 50. Well, now they're going forward. They're moving the ball at speed. They're getting it to the open side. And they have some really skillful, quick and fast players. So speed of ball movement and also skill level exceptional. Todd Marshall just makes a huge difference. He's some sort of player, Todd Marshall. And they've been crying out to get that forward line settled. Dixon to come back. They've won 9 in a row and a really big game on Friday night against the Bulldogs at Marvel. West Coast and Collingwood.
Well, it doesn't speak volumes, but it says a little bit more about them, and that's Collingwood. I thought West Coast really came with some heat. They, Dom Sheed had 40, Liam Duggan, halfback in midfield, Tim Kelly. So their midfield, and Elliot Yeo sort of back from injury last couple of weeks, and really has stepped up. Looks like the West Coast of old in some shape or form. Through the midfield in particular, but Collingwood were challenged, right up to when Andrew Gaff had a shot on goal to put them within.
Why can't he kick 35 metres anymore?
He can. He didn't. It was. I think his confidence is a little low compared to where he has been at his peak. He's not a young player anymore. But that was probably a representation of a lack of belief and confidence at the moment, not just for him but for the team, because he's been an All-Australian player for a long time and really should have finished that one.
It was so good to see West Coast in a game that felt like it meant something. Like you actually wanted to watch them.
Well, you were talking about the crowd.
Yeah,
do you realise that probably more than half of those were Collingwood people?
Yeah, I understand that, but across the board, West Coast, you go back and look at their crowds for whoever they've played this year, not just because it's Collingwood, but the games that they've played at home, Essendon, they had a big... They're always 40, low 40s. And for a team in this predicament, they're the best fans in the competition. I've got no doubt about that.
Yeah, and look, I think that's what I would hope that we see the supporter bases of all clubs. But it's not. But I thought Collingwood just did what they had to do and really hit the accelerator, with Nick Dacos probably inspiring that run towards the end, and he had another game out of the box, which was not exceptional because it's become the norm. Western Bulldogs and the Cats.
Geelong. I'd love to be a Geelong supporter. Their fans are spoilt. Like this team, when it feels like the season could just disappear and you lose 3 in a row and you got injuries everywhere, they've refused to rebuild. They refuse to give up on any season, and their players refuse to do that on Saturday night. So the pressure, the intensity around the ball was elite. They had no real right to win that game. Like from all the measures, from all the stats, compare the talent of both lineups, and somehow they found a way to just scrap and claw their way to a really important victory. They'll have the bye, which comes at a great time. Then it's a tough 3 weeks for them. They go to Adelaide to take on Port Adelaide, Melbourne at home, and Sydney at the SCG. So we'll get a good indication in the next 3 weeks. But just love the fact that they refuse to die and refuse to give up.
Brilliant.
Gold Coast and Adelaide, I know you watch this one closely.
Yeah, look, I'm going to go with the Suns. It speaks volumes of their belief in their contested style and the Darwin conditions, hot, humid, slippery. They feed into what Gold Coast's best football is at the moment. But then you've got players like Lukosius Humphrey, who's got some real grit to him, but Lukosius, who's been probably a finisher or an outside player and been known for his skill. So he won 3 or 4 really important one-on-ones to score at times. Throughout when the Suns were on their comeback, to come back from 6 goals down and to play the 2.5 quarters out as they did, plus 14 contested ball in the second quarter, plus 7 in the third, and then plus 18 in the last quarter shows you, or plus 22, in the last quarter. That consistent and across the board capacity to win the ball, to put your head over it, and to be prepared just to take territory and take the contest towards your goals really put a good opposition to the sword. So I thought that was a really meritorious win. They'd be wrapped with that. Now they go into next week with a bye, and then after that they come back on the other side. They've got Carlton, who they'd be looking forward to that, and then Hawthorn, and then Collingwood after that. So they've got an opportunity now in the next 2 weeks to reinforce their position, to get seriously on the positive side of a 50-50 win-loss ratio, which they haven't really been there for a long time. So to get to 8 and 6 now, it's not done, but to get to 8 and 6 would be a great result, and then come and test yourself against some of the better teams in the competition. So look, they'd be suitably happy with themselves, and so they should be, because it was a great performance. Can we come back to Taranto in the top 150? His last 2 weeks have got to get him in the top 140.
Very solid yesterday.
Very solid. Was it 32 and 1?
Yeah, but stop looking at numbers. Like, he's going to get. If you
want numbers,
you're playing the midfield on your own all game, you're going to get numbers. My criticism was never about the number. It was about what you're doing with that number.
36 and 1. And you're talking about numbers. That 150 was the number.
Well, that was the number, yes. But some people saw that as a negative. I say that's still pretty good to be in the top 18% of players in the comp.
Where is he?
I'll have to revisit that.
When we go and sit at the first All-Australian meeting on Wednesday,
I think
will his name be thrown up?
Absolutely, his name should be thrown up.
And we have a squad of, we end up settling on a squad of 40.
I think he would definitely be considered heavily.
Will we consider 150? Like 150, you've got to accept that it's.
He was
too much.
Are you as critical? I think he was 100 with champion data last week. So he may have moved into the top 100 with them.
All right, I'm going to go first out of Giants and
it's
Tigers.
Not the time for that debate.
It was a cheap shot, Buckley.
It was
a cheap shot.
Whammy.
I think it says a fair bit about Richmond.
Didn't they defend well?
Yeah, look, 104 points, but yes, they did.
No, well, they conceded 72 entries.
Yeah, that's not great defence to concede that much.
I meant their
back 50.
Yeah, their back six.
Look, there's a lot to like about both these sides. I think it speaks volumes for both. Yeah, for what looks like a match that doesn't really amount to much in the season 2023. We don't believe that either of these sides are in the position to go and contend. GWS have come off against a really good win against Geelong, which, looking at their performance, the Cats' performance against the Dogs, actually looks even better again. And then Richmond, who are 2 weeks into McWalter's caretaker role, and get his first win. So I thought it was an excellent game. They both stayed true to themselves. They want to be fast with the ball, and they're prepared to be really aggressive in offense. and they were forced to defend really well, both of them. But I just thought that it says a bit about Richmond. I think that Dimmer's stepped out, but there's no doubt that he's left a playing group who have got just great belief in each other, that have got they'll buy into whatever they're asked to do, and that doesn't happen overnight. It's something that is built in the culture of the Richmond Football Club, and I'm pretty sure the supporters would have enjoyed seeing their guts at the end of the game to hold on and then to finish that
so
off.
it was plus 15 entries, the Giants, in the last quarter alone.
Yeah, so I mean that is just holding up. That's the rope-a-dope type stuff, isn't it? And then they go back and go the other way.
Liam Baker, I don't know. I know his resume is outstanding, we spoke a little bit about Tom Stewart earlier on in the program and whether he's still underrated. He's a genuine star.
Well,
I know that's obvious, but we don't speak about him much.
Did we have a
Liam
chat
Baker.
earlier this year when we actually spoke about guys that you just
Giving
love
credit,
to, like guys that you'd love to play with, blokes that you look out on the field or you're witnessing a team go about it and you just see a guy just continually just put himself on the line or run himself to exhaustion or go back with the flight or. Yeah, and they're not always the most skillful, pristine-looking players. They're the ones that just play with heart, and Liam Baker is a heart player.
Can play back midfield and went forward on the weekend to great effect. Now, Pickett's goal, as we just heard with Coxie, who I'm sure would love to play that again, was for Loctite adhesives, fast, strong, and reliable. The possibilities are limitless. All it takes is a few drops.
SEN North
game.
Melbourne, that's you.
Yeah, well, I think North. I mean, I was pretty complimentary of what they did last week, and rightly so. Some terrific passages of play, but their work in the contest yesterday with the young group that they've had, it was like a moment you go, okay, all right, I can see where this is going. And a number of times this year I've said one draft can change the whole trajectory of your footy club. Trajectory, I should say, not directory. And that is the case with what North have done. So Sheaves will love the fact that he's going a bit more on ball, and I think it's a really good challenge for him. Wardlaw, we've touched on, is just like, wow, this guy can be anything. And they stood up and they really challenged the Bombers with ball movement and around the contest. So I thought it was a pivotal day for them. Yes, you're going to have to get over the line in one of these shortly.
Yeah.
Because it's the second one in short time with Sydney and now the Bombers, where they really should have won that game, and you need that reward.
Yeah. Well, they're getting reward out of being in those games. So that's a step forward. But you're right, that only lasts so long. It's you're spot on. But you got to give Essendon their props as well. You know, they're playing. Offensively, their shape looks really good. They're not all on one another, so you never see 4 or 5 Essendon players within 10 metres of one another. They're always really well spread, so they handle the big ball movement stuff really well. They make the ground big. It's hard to defend them.
I didn't love their ball movement. Yes, I thought it was long bomb inside 50 time after time.
And that's not as normal for them. They move the ball really well. They've got Peter Wright coming back in will improve them, but. Yeah, Bombers fans would be pretty happy with what they're getting out of their squad, and young players, Perkins, Menzies, young Menzies is a player, Hobbs, Durham, awesome, and then they got a few to come back, so who knows?
I think they make the 8 from here. The Bombers, big game against Carlton at the MCG this weekend. That speaks volumes. Brisbane up there, sitting reasonably nicely. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, they had a few stumbles early in the year and were criticised roundly with the way they went about it, in particular their forward group. But at 8-3, they've played some really good footy. They've taken some scalps. They seem to have been as consistent as anyone up that top end of the ladder. Josh Dunkley's come in. Got to be impressed with the way that he's gone about it, and it takes time. Like even if you've got a wealth of footy under your belt, and to get used to a new group of players takes time, and that midfield's now operating, as good as any. Lockie Neal, if you can have a quiet sort of gun half of the year, that's where he's been. And they've buffered some injuries in behind the ball as well. Their intercept markers. Yeah, Jack Payne's come up and looked really good in the stead of I've lost his Adams who is probably going to be a long-term out. But they're introducing a little bit of youth. Ashcroft's done the job pretty well. I think that they're always a watch because they've had really good home and aways, and then the question is, can they get it done? The irony of it was they hit September last year in the worst nick that they've ever hit a final series, but then 1-2 finals. Yeah. So that experience on especially the win on the MCG against Melbourne would stand them in good stead, but they're just positioning themselves very well.
Freo is another one of those teams. They've won their last 4, Freo, and you were thinking, about round 6 after they got smashed by Brisbane and the Western Bulldogs, it was season over. But for them to be able to revitalise their season, now part of that was they played themselves into form against Hawthorn in round 8, and then they've gone bang. The win against Geelong was significant, and then Melbourne at the MCG. Again, they play Richmond at home after the bye, then GWS, and then Essendon at home as well. So a really good opportunity to perhaps win 7 in a row. But they won a final last year as well, so the expectations were pretty significant. They went all in for Luke Jackson, and his form has been great in the last month. Darcy's out with that hamstring injury. The midfield has really revitalised themselves and got back to their strengths, which was so strong running, defensively sound last year. And they've got some good small forwards that do the job. Their backline has never been an issue. Love Ryan and Cox and Pearce.
Yeah, they're just solid. And Young's going to be a gun. Yep. Like he is a young bloke. We were just talking about players that sort of pop up and leave a mark on you. He's probably done it with a slow burn. He's looked really good as he's travelled along, but he's a sneaky, solid player. He's just one of those guys that just helps teams win, which is exactly the type of players you need. But they've been able to. They've definitely steadied their season, and you have to, like, they won 15 games last year, 15-7, which is a great home and away to qualify just outside the top 4. Their last month has righted the ship in some ways. I really enjoyed Justin Longmuir's comments after the win, which was, we've just put ourselves back in the season. No more than that. Yep. So we put ourselves back in the season. They do have an opportunity in the next stage of the draw to really establish themselves. But they've got a lot of talent there and still with a bit to go as well.
Saints fans, you can have your say. They won the first 4 of the Saints, and they've gone loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. And it was a nasty loss against Hawthorn. Before the bye, they play Sydney at the SCG. Have they been found out? The Saints, is this where we probably thought they would land, somewhere between 8 and 12?
No, I had them as a bottom 4 side.
Yeah, I think I did
at
too.
The beginning of the year, and I that was after, pardon me, that was after watching the Pracky match against Essendon, and neither of the sides looked like they were around the mark. To me, I thought that that was going to be a real struggle. That was probably one of the most uninspiring Pracky or games of footy I've seen anywhere. But what they were able to do early is buy into the coach. They had that early run and the early wave of this is what it feels like to be connected and to play the type of footy that we're capable of. But you need depth to be able to do that, and you need to be able to produce it constantly. So, yep. And in many ways they may have been found out recently, but the next sort of 3 or 4 games are going to tell a tale, because the other sides, they may well feel like they can get through them. It seems like there's a high uncontested mark game that troubles them, and their defence are starting to be pulled apart a little bit. So that's the real challenge for them.
The Swans are in 12th position. They lost 4 in a row from round 6 to 9. They then just got over the line against North Melbourne with that controversial interchange infringement, which got them the win. Then it was a much better performance against Carlton in round 11 at the SCG. They take on St Kilda at the SCG after that, before going to Brisbane to play them at the Gabba. And I'm just glad they've maintained themselves in touch with the 8, because we know the issues that they have had with injury, particularly behind the ball. But their midfield has been the real issue for them. So what is he going to do to try and regenerate their contest and clearance work and their centre bounce work, because what was once a strength for them has evaporated. And if you've been able to match Sydney in contest and at stoppage, you've pretty much won the game. So we'll see what he's got up his sleeve.
Yeah.
Heaney went in there and did a really good defensive job on Patrick Cripps. Maybe he has some more time in there, and Papley is always interesting with how they use him.
I think the coach and the coaching staff at Sydney are as good as any.
Yep,
so I put them right up there with Geelong and their ability to make the most of the squad that they have, and they've always been competitive. Sydney have put together a young squad that were expected to continue on their path. So is this just a dip with some of those young guys? So Goulden's continued to be great. Mills, they've missed. But they are missing something. They've cut their teeth on contest and hard run both ways, and they're being. I mean, Nick Blakey's been one that's just come up out of the box.
No continuity with the ruckman as well. Like every week, it feels like they're chopping and changing through injury and poor form in their ruck, which does.